And so I was very excited about this, and that's really incorporating mindfulness into a didactic teaching setting. And so what I want to talk to you about is the what, the why, the how, and the outcomes for how we incorporated this into the course that I'm course coordinator of and teach in. We'll come to that in a couple of minutes. But I also want to give some credit because it was only really after reading this book called Mindful Learning by Dr. Sasad and Chambers that I could really kind of conceptualize how to put this together into my course. So if you're looking for some good reading, I highly recommend this one. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is essentially the state or quality of being present in the moment, being engaged on what you're working on, irregardless of chatter that can be happening in the background. And in an educational setting, we're looking at being engaged with the material of what we are trying to teach our learners, and having our learners actually engage with that material and being focused in a classroom setting or when they're sitting down to work with that material. It has been shown to reduce stress, which then has also been shown to reduce the cognitive load caused by stress, which then kind of opens up these other avenues for learning and promotes student engagement as well as positive outlook, which is really great when your students have that buy-in on what you're teaching. And then hand in hand with this is getting our students or our learners engaged in in their own educational process. And one way to do this is by giving them choice and autonomy within the course itself. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that works within the course that I teach here in a couple of slides. But when they have this autonomous motivation, what we find is that it improves their academic performance. They actually engage more, they learn more, and they perform better. And they also have, again, a better outlook, positive outlook on what we're teaching, which is really great. So, okay, I keep talking about in my class, what do I teach? I'm a clinical pathologist. I'm a veterinary clinical pathologist. And so clinical pathology is essentially the field of medicine and pathology that uses laboratory data to evaluate patients in health and disease. And so the course that I teach is in the second year of our Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program, which is a 4-year program. It's a 3-credit course, and I work from anywhere from 100 to 130 students. Now, 30 of these students are on a different location. They're at Utah State University, and so these changes that I'm talking about are with the 100 students that are on the Pullman campus in that in-person session. So essentially, what I'm doing is trying to get my learners to look at laboratory data, which is what you're looking at here, and use this to make clinical decisions on diagnosis, treatment, and monitoring for their patients, which is something they're going to be doing every day in their clinical life. Now, looking at this is a bunch of numbers, and this is a bunch of alphabet soup. And so you can imagine that it's easy for this data to be separated from the patient. And what we're finding is that by using these mindful techniques, it's not just me telling the students how important this is. My learners are actually going in and seeing that what they're going to be using this for, and they're identifying how this is important to their future careers, and then they're also bringing the patient back into the classroom, which is great because that's what the goal is. So let's talk about the how. Step 1, organize and plan early. If you're thinking about doing this, don't do it in the semester that you're currently teaching in. The more you do in advance, the smoother it's going to go and the less work it's going to be during the semester itself. And then the next really important thing is be transparent. We want to model what we're actually teaching. We want to actually be mindful, which means choosing our teaching methods with intention and then sharing that intention and that evidence based on the teaching tools that you're using with your students. In my Canvas page, I have an additional resources section that is essentially just literature based on the teaching tools that we use. So that when I have learners come and talk to me and say, I don't understand why we're doing this, not only can I refer them to the data and the literature that says this is why this works and this is what the goal is, but we can actually have a conversation about it. And thus far, every time I've had this conversation, it's actually come out with a really positive outcome of saying, I get it now. That is what this is doing, which is a really great place to be in. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of the nitty-gritty of how this works. In the course that I teach, we utilize the Universal Design for Learning, which essentially is giving our learners options on how they interact with the material, whether it is the lecture material, whether it is assignments, or whether it is extra practice material. And there is no judgment from us on how they are choosing to interact with this material. We give them options. Now, if I have a learner that is struggling, I am going to ask to meet with them, and I am going to sit and talk with them about how they are engaging with the material so that we can talk about what is working and what may not be working, and then make suggestions from there so that they can get the most out of the course. So that is the caveat. And of course, I always recommend in-person attendance, but that's not always possible. I've had students come up to me and say, I have migraines in the mornings. My class is at 8 a.m. So they're not going to be able to fully engage in an 8 a.m. class in person as they would with the material if they're watching a Zoom recording later in the afternoon when they're not fighting that migraine. So again, there's no judgment, but there are options. So this is what my workflow looks like, and this is what I sat down to kind of figure out beforehand. And so for the way we work in this class is we have 3 exams. One falls during finals week, the other 2 are during the semester, and each exam covers a section of material. And so for each section of material, this is what the workflow looks like. And we're going to go through some of the more specific pieces of this as we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is the group exam. It's a little different. I 100% stole this from Jeff Abbott in the DVM program as well. So I'm not taking credit for this, but I want to talk about it because it works. So after the exam, which is an in-class individual effort, it's actually the only individual effort in my entire course. I open up, after all learners have completed the exam, I open up the group exam, which is the exact same material. And I want them to go through it. It's open note, open front, and it really encourages them to engage in peer learning because your learners teach each other better than you teach them. So the whole goal on a lot of this is getting them to talk and getting them to engage and having that peer learning. Now, hopping over to the beginning, the first place that they're going to have an opportunity to get credit for engaging with material is in these assignments, which we call case write-ups. And this essentially gives the learners an opportunity to engage with those lecture materials in a clinical simulation. They do have options. They can pick a large animal or a small animal option. They have the same, cover the same concepts, but as you can imagine with veterinarians, sometimes you get small animal veterinarians, sometimes you get ones that go into large animal. It helps them kind of choose which one best fits what they see their path as being. It is rubric graded. This is my rubric. And as you can see, it's not very specific. And the whole point of a lot of these things that are kind of these low point values, they're low stakes for a reason. So if you put the work in, you get the credit. And so what I'm looking for is really, do they come up with a problem list? Are they using the right words? Are they explaining it? Recommending some additional testing or treatment? And then can I understand it? So it's very surface level. But in order for them to kind of learn from it and see where they're going, we also provide instructor write-ups, which is essentially my version or another instructor in the class's version of how we would have approached the case. And we encourage them to compare it, compare their write-up to that. And we do that by having them do reflections. And we do the reflections after each assignment and after the exam process, after the group exam's done and scores are released. And essentially what I'm asking on here is, what was your approach? Tell me something you learned. Tell me something you're going to do different next time. What are you taking forward? And so instead of me telling them what they're going to get out of my class, I'm asking them, what are you going to get? What are you getting out of this information? And while essentially you get credit for just doing this, it is really uplifting to read them after all of this. So it's definitely been a positive thing for the instructors as well. And so all of these things have a low point value assigned to them. And so if you look at how I've got the scoring system set up in this course, the vast majority comes from these exams, which is what's in this like kind of pale orange color. And knowing that we are on a pass marginal fail system, and in the year that I teach in, anything over a 78 is a pass. I've got this designed so that if I have a learner that comes in that only wants to do exams, come in, go to the lectures, do their exams, they can pass the course. They don't have to engage in any of this. This is all optional. But if they do engage in this, I built in a buffer. So if they do this extra, if they're staying engaged throughout the semester, if they're doing these assignments, if they're doing the reflections, they are building themselves in a buffer for if they have a bad testing day, or when it comes to finals week and they have 5 tests in 1 week. And with that, it takes that stress, that cognitive load caused by stress off, which means I'm getting better exam scores across the board. So let's talk about some outcomes. I've got our WSU of the course and then my own personal evaluations from when I started and took over as course coordinator in 2022 through 2024. And really what I want to point out is what the improvement was just with 1 semester. And it is statistically significant, although that's not very strong because it's a very small cohort, but to do the stats on it. And not only are we getting higher evaluation scores, but if we look at the evaluation completion, because of how we have things set up, we're getting a lot more students and learners filling out our evaluations. Now, granted, I did incentivize it this year based on numbers of filling out evaluations. If a certain percentage of the course filled it out, they got an exam question, no answer, just the question. But 10% of these students at least filled this out after the final scores were out, which means that's after the incentive is over, which tells me that they actually are being engaged and care about their own learning. And I'm going to leave you with, or the last thing I really want to bring up is some feedback from our learners. And I want to say positive feedback. All of it was positive. It was literally pages upon pages of positive feedback since we made this change, which was really, again, it was a little surprising how well this worked out for us and how well it resonated with our learners. And I will also say that all of my learners passed the course, and this is the first time that that's happened. So whatever we're doing, it worked. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to the teaching team. The other thing I want to point out is there are 5 of us that teach in this course. And something that has been consistently said within our evaluation comments is how smoothly the transition from one instructor to the other has been. And that's because we're all on the same page and we all had the same planning. And so that organize and plan ahead and getting everybody on, having that buy-in as a group really made a difference. And so with this, I wanted to leave you guys with, we're all people too, being human. This is actually an image that I use in the introductory lecture to remind our learners that we are all human. But if we get to the end of this and you want to talk more about this and we don't have time in the Q&A, here's my email. Please talk to me about it. I'm very excited because it worked so well. So, and that's all I got for you.